It is definitely a beautiful and lovely morning across Africa. Good morning. While I'm going business this morning, we'll look at stakeholder management. And of course, we happen to have Dr. Chooks, who is a management expert who's going to share more about that topic. Interesting topic, I should admit. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. How are you?
It's a pleasure to have you on GMA.
It is indeed a pleasure to be here.
So I know that you're a regular feature on our show, but just for our new viewers who are actually seeing you for the first time, please tell us more about your work.
Well, I do a very simple piece of work. Simple because it's something that occurs to me naturally. And if you do have a natural bent for education and teaching, you are in heaven when you are a lecturer. So basically, in a nutshell, I work for the University of Pretoria, precisely the Department of Business Management, and we're in the business of making people. Not making babies, making people so that they can bring a change to the lives of others in community.
I love that. So now, talking about stakeholder management, maybe the first question will be, who is a stakeholder?
Interesting question because there are several different perspectives of it, but we will try and keep it simple. I think that technically speaking, a very simple definition of a stakeholder would be someone who can affect or is affected by what we do as an organization.
All right.
And therefore, because of the fact that this individual or group can affect or is affected by what we do, they take an interest in it. So anyone who falls within that category typically is a stakeholder.
All right. Now, the categories, which would make me ask the next question to say, are there different types of stakeholders?
Yes, surely there are different types of stakeholders. And in management, there is a particular function of management or task, some people choose to say, called organizing. The whole point of organizing is to create homogeneous groups out of a heterogeneous universe. And if we speak about stakeholders, surely there will be different kinds of stakeholders. In order to manage these stakeholders properly, it becomes imperative to attempt to compartmentalize them, which is a case of organizing. So it is possible for you to have different types of stakeholders depending on what dimension you rely upon to categorize them. There is indeed a direction or dimension for categorizing stakeholders which are based on stakeholder attributes of power, of agency, and of legitimacy. Interestingly, if we utilize those three categories or dimensions, we will find 7 different kinds of stakeholders. We have definitive stakeholders, we can have dominant stakeholders, we can have dormant stakeholders, we can have demanding stakeholders, we can have dangerous stakeholders, and the list can go on and on. The important thing to note is that since there are so many stakeholders, we have to be careful how we manage the different groupings.
Quite interesting to note that there are different stakeholders, but now I wanted to find out what makes that kind of uniqueness to say that we have to have different stakeholders. Is it a matter of you choosing to say that I'm going to be a dormant stakeholder, or something like that?
No, the stakeholder has no choice here. It is based upon certain attributes or characteristics or features that we see in the stakeholder. For instance, if the stakeholder has power and power alone as an attribute,
yes,
the stakeholder is considered to be a dormant stakeholder. If that dormant stakeholder begins to play in the scheme of the things that you're doing, which means the stakeholder is beginning to take more than a passing interest, the stakeholder moves from a dormant position into a dominant position.
All right.
So basically in stakeholder management, we are utilizing static tools, if you like, to capture what is ordinarily a dynamic concept.
So stakeholder management,
so stakeholder management has to be a continuous thing to a large extent because we must continue to monitor the movement of the stakeholder based upon the change in attributes. I mean, there are other dimensions as well, easier dimensions perhaps.
Yes.
I have taken a slightly complicated one because we're looking at 3 different attributes. There are dimensions of whether the stakeholder is external or an internal stakeholder. That's straightforward. There's a dimension based upon value, in which case we'll find stakeholders who are primary stakeholders and those who are secondary stakeholders. The point really to make here is that we cannot begin to aspire to manage a stakeholder if we cannot, first of all, identify or describe the stakeholder.
Okay.
That's your start point for stakeholder management.
Beautiful. Now, let's talk about the importance of having stakeholders when it comes to organizational success. What is it?
Well, stakeholders are critical to organizational success. The reason being that The extent to which an organization is able to achieve its objective is dependent upon the extent of cooperativeness that it gets from different people.
Okay.
For instance, employees are stakeholders. If employees do not get on board with you, there's no chance of you achieving your objectives as an organization. The community in which you work in are stakeholders. If they do not get on board with you, then they frustrate your activities. Your funders or your banks, those who provide you with finance, are stakeholders. Again, if they do not buy into your aspirations, unfortunately, your mission will be scuttled. And so it is important that stakeholders' expectations and interests resonate with the objectives of the organization. Otherwise, the organization will not be able to achieve its objectives. I think that a very easy example is what's happening in Nigeria in the area of the Niger Delta.
Yes.
For a long time, we had oil exploitation and exploration going on in complete disregard of the people who inhabit that particular community. And the consequences of that is pretty known to everyone now. It's unfortunately blown over and it's gotten far worse than it should get. So typically, if organizations pay attention and manage their relationships properly with stakeholders, then they are likely to achieve their objectives. Indeed, the issue has become so topical that it has become a matter of governance. In South Africa, there's something called the King 3 report, which is a report that prescribes the manner in which organizations should be governed. In the King 3 report, there are clear stipulations that stakeholder relationships have not only to be identified, but managed and enhanced optimally in order for the organization to achieve its objectives.
Beautiful. I sense that management is key when it comes to stakeholders. Now we might want to find out, what is stakeholder management? In
very simple terms, because I like to go the simple route all the time. In very simple terms, stakeholder management is an approach which is hinged upon an instrumental theory that an organization's adherence to simple ethical principles such as cooperativeness and trustworthiness can indeed generate a competitive advantage for the organization. We are saying, in effect, that stakeholder management brings with it a moral obligation on the part of the organization to act in a manner that does not jeopardize the interest or the livelihood of people who are around the operations of the organization. Okay, so this means creating a process that not only identifies these expectations, but expects a process that perhaps leans towards reconciling these expectations with the objectives of the organization.
Well, I should admit it's been a pleasure having you in the studio. Have an awesome morning.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Well, Africa, on that note, we've come to the end of this segment. Hope you enjoyed it. Well, of course, any business that you're running, you need to know the stakeholders that you're involved with. Know them and also how best you can manage them. On that point, it's a wrap, and of course, see you soon.